Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Alexandra and I am the designer behind Sycamore Road Patterns. In this video, I'm going to explain in detail how to sew my Carmen Coat sewing pattern, which you can find on my website sycamoreroadpatterns.com. The Carmen Coat is a slightly oversized, double-breasted coat with raglan sleeves and a belt that ties at the natural waist. This coat was a dream of mine to design, a really advanced project that was as much of a challenge as a joy to create. I'm not a tailor, I'm a self-taught sewist, and this tutorial is meant to help sew the coat of your dreams, not to dictate your sewing practice. The pattern itself was drafted professionally and I think it turned out so beautiful. I will divide up the pattern tutorial into parts. I recommend taking this project step by step and to really take your time with it. I'm going to start by showing you all of the pattern pieces. This is the undercollar. I've marked it with an O because it's onder in Dutch, my native language. There's a slight difference between the undercollar and the upper collar. The undercollar is slightly smaller, so it stays in place more easily when it rolls around the neckline. I've block fused the collar pieces and applied stay tape all around the edges. This is the upper collar. The belt loops also block fused. The belt is also cut twice and block fused as well. By the way, block fusing is basically the same as interfacing, except for that you don't cut out the interfacing before applying it. Two welt pocket pieces which I've interfaced, and I also applied stay tape down the middle. These are the sleeves. You can see that they are not interfaced, but they do have stay tape around the edges, around the curves actually. Yeah, and you probably already know this, but you need to make sure that you cut these sleeves mirrored. So these are the backs of the sleeves, they are facing each other, and there's stay tape on the wrong side. These are the back panels. Let me just show you one of them. This is the right side. That marking there is actually not correct. You mark the vent from the wrong side and you apply stay tape along the vent as well. You can see that there's a slight curve along the center back. That is one of the features that makes it a women's pattern. If I'm making it for a man, I just straighten that part out. This is the top of the back panel. You can see that it's just partly interfaced. There's a pattern piece for that. So you cut that part out first and then apply the interfacing. So that's different from block fusing. This is the other one. And then this is the front panel. You cut this one twice, of course. I'm just showing you one here. Be sure that you mark the lapel roll line correctly. It needs to go up to the second notch. This is the first notch, and then there is the second one. The welt pocket box is marked here as well. This needs to be super precise. You can also mark this with thread, that way you can make it even more accurate. The button markers aren't transferred yet. I'm making this coat for my mom and she actually just wants an internal snap button, so that's why. This is the other front panel. These are the facing pieces. This is actually what gets sewn onto the front panel. And that's it for the main fabric. Onto the lining, you need to cut 4 pocket bag pieces. I am using Cupro, which is actually cotton, but it's highly processed to make it silkier. It's very comfortable and it's obviously cheaper than silk, and it does the job really well. Sewing with this type of fabric is actually kind of difficult. It moves around a lot when you're marking and sewing it. So, you know, it's important to be as accurate as you can when you're marking the welt pocket box here. This is the sleeve. These need to be cut out twice as well, of course. The sleeves get sewn onto the front and back panel of the lining, and the sleeves are a little bit shorter than the back panel. So that way you can sew the back panel onto the neckline and make that corner. I'll insert a photo of the neckline here so you can see what I mean. These are the back panels. Something important about these back panels, you'll see that in a second, is that the left back panel has a cutout at the vent. And when I say left, I mean left when wearing the coat. So the left pattern piece has a cutout at the vent and the right panel does not, because you have to fill up that space. This will all become more clear later on when you're sewing the vent, but just make sure you know which side is which here. Lastly, these are the front panels. They might look a little bit odd. They have a different shape than the main front panels, main fabric I mean, and that's because you sew the lining to the facings and not to the front panels themselves. And that's it for the lining. Onto the notions. So for the notions, you'll need 4 buttons and 1 internal button. You can just get an extra regular one if you can't find a transparent button like this. I'm not using any buttons in this pattern, like I said, but you probably will. A seam ripper, obviously always important to have on hand, some thread and a bobbin. I like the transparent ones because you can see how much thread is left on them. You'll need some bias stay tape. I'll just show you what that looks like. So as you can see, you can curve this around the edges really easily, and there is a thread running along the side there, and that thread is actually what reinforces the curves. You'll need a hand sewing needle and some thread. I recommend using contrasting thread so you can see it really well, and then you also won't forget to take it out after you're done with it. A piece of chalk and a chalk sharpener. You need to mark very carefully to avoid any mistakes. So usually I just keep on, sharpening that little piece of chalk before every marking that I make, basically. You need something to measure with. You can use a measuring tape. I recommend using something that looks like this as well. You can also use like a quilting ruler for that too, but I don't have one and I think they're pretty expensive. So I just use what I have on hand. Some scissors, of course. You can use a thread snipper, but I couldn't find mine, so I'm just using 2 pairs of scissors today. Some pins. I really like using these. They're much faster. I just use these for like the side seams, for example, longer pieces of fabric that are getting sewn together. For the more accurate stuff, I usually use pins instead. This is a walking foot. It doesn't come with most machines. It is kind of expensive, but it is worth the investment, in my opinion. It helps to keep the layers of fabric feeding through the machine evenly, which is kind of important if you're sewing long pieces of fabric together. So before I showed you the bias stay tape, you also need non-stretch woven stay tape. I just got that out of regular woven interfacing, obviously out of longer pieces than this, but the stay tape needs to be about 1 centimeter wide. And then this is my wool interfacing. It's a little bit lighter and softer than the interfacing I use for the stay tape. So yeah, you can actually ask your notion shop what type of interfacing is best for the type of wool you've selected, because that can be different. If it's very heavy wool, for example, you can use a lighter interfacing, and the other way around too. And then lastly, you need a wool offcut to protect the outside of the fabric when you're ironing and pressing. I haven't experienced any issues when ironing wool, but I recommend using it anyway, especially if you're not working with 100% wool. And that's everything you need. Let's get to the second part of this tutorial, the welt pockets.